Okay guys, the next thing that I'm going to demo is stitching unit B3L, but I'm going to do a couple things differently just to give you all of your options, and then this way you can kind of pick and choose, mix and match what works for you. So we're going to start out the exact same way. Remember that these are mirror images of each other right now because I have the right side of the fabric up, but I will need to turn it over to this direction in order to put it on my unit. And notice on my template, you can see that I have plenty of space all around. I'm probably going to line up this corner right here, kind of along the edge, and kind of let it go from there. So I'm going to put glue on the back side. Give it a nice little bit of glue all the way around the edge. And I'm going to kind of line up this bottom corner. It's sticking out a little bit, but I can see that I have plenty of space here. Up here, remember, I'm not trying to match it here because my next fabric is going to go here. I only need to come to like just past this basting line here. So I am good at this point. I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to go ahead and go sew all of my TRP lines. Looks like there's 4 of them, and I'm also going to sew this basting stitch. So I'm going to do that and come right back to you. All right, I have sewn all 4 of my TRP lines with a basting length stitch about a 2.8 on my machine. And then I've also sewn along this actual basting stitch line. And here's where I'm going to deviate from what I did before. I'm not going to pull this back and trim this underneath piece quite yet. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the step of taking this piece, make sure you have your TRP sewn, and pulling this paper off. And I'll talk about some advantages and disadvantages of each method at the end of the video. All right, so now that I have this, I'm going to go ahead and turn to this other side, match my TRP line up here, and place some glue. So this part is the same. The only thing that's different is that I didn't trim the excess fabric yet. I'm going to do that towards the end, but I'm still placing this right along that TRP line is lined up, and I'm right up against the basting line that I stitched, this line right here. Right, I'm going to swing this around and lay this down all the way to the end. My bottom fabric sticks out past this, but remember that there was a lot of excess fabric here. We're fine. And the same thing on this side. Laying it right up against that basting stitch. Let's make sure it's all good and adhered. And again, if you wanted to, you could go in with your iron and just gently press along here to try and get that to lay flatter. And now I'm ready to take this to my sewing machine. All right, here I am at my sewing machine, and I could do this the same way that I did the last one. I could take this top piece and lift it up and stitch along line 2, but on this one I'm actually going to flip it over and do a more traditional curved piecing where I just use my 1/4 inch foot in order to stitch the line. I will have less chance of getting a pleat that way, but again, you're relying on your accuracy of your 1/4 inch line and your ability to stitch that versus having a line to stitch on. So it's a trade-off, but I wanted to show you can do it either way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start getting my fabric aligned right here at my 1/4 inch. And the camera is almost in the way of me being able to see at the moment, but we'll see how this goes. And I'm just going to go slowly and make sure that I'm not getting any pleats as I go. Since I'm on this more ruffled side, I'll be able to see that, and I can use my purple thing to kind of push those out of the way if it looks like I'm about to get a pleat. All right, so again, I'm on a 1.8 stitch length now, which is my paper piecing stitch length, and here we go. So I'm just trying to maintain this line. If I see that I'm about to deviate off of it, I'm going to stop and adjust. This is a good time to have needle down if you have that ability to change to needle down as you stop. And I'm just going real slow, kind of making sure that this fabric is easing in. I can use my fingers, I can use my purple thing to kind of make sure things are laying flat as I sew. Probably slowing a little bit slower than I normally would, but again, I'm kind of looking at this from an awkward angle because the camera is almost in my way here. All right, and that's just extra fabric there on the end, so I'm not going to worry about maintaining a 1/4 inch there. And let's just sew off onto a piece so that I keep my threads up. All right. So I shouldn't have the issue of having any pleats, and I don't. And I can just now take this to my iron, and I'm going to use my pressing pen and get a nice good press on this, and then I'll show you the next steps from there. All right, so I have pressed this out now. And I wanted to point something out to you before you go any further. You do want to check on the back and make sure that you are happy with how this came out. Remember, we were kind of sewing blind. We were not using this line as a guide this time. This is just an option. We were doing traditional curved piecing where we use our 1/4 inch foot to stay a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric. And I think I did a pretty good job. If I look right here towards the end, I can see that I was off just like by a thread, like I'm at the top of the line instead of right down the center of the line. I'm totally happy with that. I'm not going to pick it out and restitch. But if you did get off, enough that you feel like it's going to be noticeable, go ahead and, rip out a little bit of seam each side and go ahead and retry sewing that area. At this point, I'm ready to go ahead and trim my unit up, and then I will show you next steps because we still have some extra fabric underneath here that we need to get rid of. So let me trim up this unit first. Again, use rotary cutter and rulers, scissors, any combination of that you're comfortable with for the trimming. Okay, at this point I have trimmed up my entire unit all along the outside edge, and you absolutely must make sure that you've done that prior to this next step if you're doing this method. This method that I'm showing you of waiting until now to trim off this extra piece is kind of Judy's updated method that she includes in some of her later patterns. Those of you that are also doing the Arctic Star pattern, you'll see that when we get to the curved piecing in that particular pattern. All right, so this is what we do. We are going to trim this excess fabric. The thing is as we trim this excess fabric, we're going to do two things. One is we're going to be able to trim to the inside of the basting stitch. So we're going to be able to get rid of that basting stitch line, which has the potential to give you a little bump in your quilt right there. If you don't get rid of that, in our other method, we did not get rid of that basting stitch line. But here's the downside, is that as you are trimming away this, you are also trimming away the paper. Technically, you don't need the paper anymore at this point. It's done its job of helping us to trim this edge. But when you go to do the curved piecing between this piece and the other piece, you will have to do it at the 1/4 inch on your presser foot versus being able to follow this line right here. Okay, so it's a trade-off. You get rid of a little extra bulk of that basting stitch, but you do lose your paper and that guide. And so if that's important to you to have that guide and be able to do this method of having the paper on top when you stitch the next piece to it, then you're going to want to stick with the first method that I showed you. Your choice of whichever way you want to do it. So let me show you. What we're going to do is we're going to pull this fabric back. We do not want to cut that. And then scissors or rotary cutter, however you want to do it. And I'm just going to go in and trim right along this basting stitch line. And I'm actually giving myself kind of a scant 1/4 inch, I guess, at this point, because I am actually trimming away the basting line itself, getting rid of that, just that teeny tiny bit of extra bulk in the seam. And again, I'm cutting through fabric and the paper underneath as I'm doing that. All right, so this is what it looks like when I'm done. And from the front side, as you can see, we have trimmed along the line. I've gotten rid of that basting stitch line, and the rest of this is sticking out beyond. We're going to still keep all of our TRP lines for now so that they can match up to the other piece. So that is the second method, and you can mix and match these methods as far as the way that you sew, sewing with the paper on top or the fabric on top, and at which point you decide to do your trimming, either before you sew so that you're just cutting away the paper but you're leaving the basting stitch line, or waiting till later and getting rid of both but getting rid of the paper. The choice is yours.